All right, so this is a continuation on water usage. So we're going to look at what we call a watershed first. So in the picture to the right here, this entire area is what we call, let me get this up really fast. This entire area is what we call a watershed. And all that means is the water that hits into that area flows into a river or a stream system, and then that can flow into a larger body of water and then obviously move its way towards the ocean. So watersheds are really important because we want to make sure that our streams and our rivers continue to get the water that they need to keep the depth of the river at its normal depth, and also to recharge those aquifers normally as well. And so that's the biggest thing when we look at protecting them. We need to make sure that we continue to have that water flow in that area. And what we looked at last lesson, we talked about ways in which we stop that from happening. So pavement and redirecting these waters, that's really important to make sure that the water is still making its way to these larger river systems to then keep those ecosystems up and running. You'll sometimes see signs that say protect our watershed. That has to do with pollution as well. If we allow massive amounts of pollution on or in these watershed areas, they're going to make their way into the river systems. That's going to disrupt the pH of the water. It's going to make it more turbid. It's going to hinder the fish species and the animals that feed off of them, as we've talked about with like biomagnification, moving up the food web or these food chains with these chemicals inside of their systems. And not to mention, or not to forget about plastics as well, making their way through the food chain. Another critical point of the water system is what we call wetlands. These wetlands are key for filtration. So filtering is very, very key from these polluted waters that make their way there. They naturally make their way through the soil. Plants take them up and they can break them down into different compounds. And also the bacteria down here in this picture, if you look where I'm circling, the bacteria in the soil will break them down. We can actually purify drinking water using somewhat of a wetland system that we'll look at in next chapter. Right? Wetlands also stabilize the soil, as you see here, and they control runoff, that surface runoff. So as that water makes its way down this hill, we don't want it to continue on, so it'll get stuck or captured by these wetlands. And then that will stop that whole downstream flow of sediment and all that other stuff that may continue on into those river systems. We don't want to really fill up our streams and our rivers with tons and tons of sediment if we don't have to. And that's one way that we can really stop that downward flow of massive amounts of water that would then cause more erosion. One last thing is that it is critical to habitat life. Okay, a lot of migrating birds, that's their stopover point, and you also have that's where they have their young, and it's a full circle there because birds will have their young, animals will have their young there, fish will lay their eggs there. So there's food opportunities and there's shelter opportunities. So it's it's a vital place to have up and running, and for it to be as clean as possible. Not to mention that it also recharges our aquifers, for sure. Okay, let's talk about water scarcity real briefly. And we can see that when we look at this, we look at a few areas. So economic water scarcity, and then we look at physical water scarcity. So areas that are really struggling with water. And if you look even in our country, we have some limited water supplies. And in those regions of our country, we're getting more and more people moving there. They're populating an area where there's not that much water. So the only thing we're going to have to do, the only way to make that sustainable is actually to divert water to them, which is going to draw water from other areas, which is a problem. But back to this slide. So when you don't have a lot of water, a lot of people live in poverty because if you can't grow crops, if you can't have animals, and if you can't bring business to an area, well, then you're going to have areas where people don't have a lot of money. And that's going to create a very, very vast economic divide in an area. Areas that have water compared to areas that don't have water, is a very, very big difference economically. Also, if you look at opportunity, children that go to school that have water, and then that means they have food most likely, they have a greater chance at succeeding than areas that are are compromised with not having a lot of water in their life to begin with. So what the World Health Organization and environmentalists around the world believe, and this is kind of true, it's coming to fruition, is that areas that lack clean water, you're going to have more people becoming sick and dying, mostly because our bodies need water, right? We're made up of a huge percentage of water. Think of just our blood alone. So you need water in order to function. And you've probably felt it if you've been dehydrated. You get headaches, can't really do as much, you're lethargic because water is so important in our lives. You're also going to have people moving to other areas. So your refugees are going to leave one area to go to another. That's going to overpopulate those regions that have water. And guess what? Water in those areas then decreases more rapidly. And then you can have conflicts between countries. They call it water wars. And when we look at water wars, what happens is if a stream is coming down, so here's our river system coming down, you have country A, you have country B. Well, country A is going to start taking all of that water, and that means country B will not have any. So if you start overdrawing, if one country starts overdrawing compared to another, or tries taking over the rights of a river system, you're going to have a conflict between those two countries. And we've seen it, and it has happened. So what can we do, or what can developed countries really do? Well, one, I put here, you can enhance local supplies. Meaning installing pumps. If we can put money into their system to install pumps that they can reach down into those aquifers, well, then that's going to have a cascading effect. If you have water, that means you're going to have more productivity from your citizens. You're also going to have less people being sick, so you're going to be able to have people going to work more often, a better education opportunities, right? Second thing, improving sanitation. So an area may have water, but it may be as dirty as anything because their sanitation system is not set up very well. Their garbage is going into the water system. They have animals in the water, animals that are dying upstream. You also have fecal matter making its way into the water system. So we need to keep that as clean as possible. And then the last thing, as always, is to educate them on all of these problems that they're having. Maybe install some farming methods that they can use their water more efficiently. There's this interesting company or this opportunity that came about. It was called the Play Pump System. I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to offer up that video for you guys to watch through Canvas coming up. One last thing is the water usage that we've seen. And this is most important, this little uptick here. And that comes through development around the world. So we have population growth. You have more economic opportunities in a lot of different countries now. And with that, you need water for that. Whether it's farming, your irrigation for farmland, even if it's an arid land, they don't have a lot of water. They're pumping water into those areas, or they're overdrawing aquifers. So our water usage is much needed in some areas. And if you think about like Africa's population is growing and growing exponentially, but a lot of their areas where they're seeing growth, there's not a lot of water available. So we're going to need more water, which is not going to be possible. So that means we need to increase our efficiency in using this water.